Welcome to the MamasteFit podcast, Birth Story Friday. In this episode, Dilshoda is going to be sharing her birth story, but more importantly, her postpartum story where she developed postpartum preeclampsia. Preeclampsia can be a life-threatening condition that you can develop during pregnancy, during your labor, and in the postpartum period. Most of us may be more familiar with developing preeclampsia during pregnancy, but it can happen in the postpartum as well, and so it's important to be aware of the signs and symptoms and seek care if needed. Preeclampsia is one of the leading causes of maternal mortality during and after pregnancy. Welcome to the MamasteFit podcast. This is Gina, perinatal fitness trainer and birth doula.
And this is Roxanne, labor and delivery nurse and student midwife.
And this is the MamasteFit podcast, where we empower you on your prenatal fitness, birth, and postpartum return to fitness journey.
Our podcast shares how to move throughout your pregnancy to stay strong and comfortable. Pain is not a requirement of pregnancy. Understand the science of birth and how to approach recovery after birth.
We share our personal experiences as mothers navigating the stage of lives, plus our professional expertise as birth workers and fitness professionals.
Our goal is to help you feel confident as you navigate the perinatal timeframe for an empowering pregnancy, positive birth, and postpartum journey.
We are glad to have you with us on this journey and that you've chosen us to support you.
Preeclampsia, whether it develops during pregnancy or postpartum, is one of the leading causes of maternal death. And this is really important to be able to learn the signs and symptoms of what you're looking for so that you can seek care in a timely manner. And this can be life-saving by seeking care. So the things that you're going to be looking for is a headache. Dilshoda will share that she had a headache in her postpartum period, and that's what encouraged her to seek care. With a preeclampsia headache, it is different than any other headache that you're going to experience in that postpartum period because it is very common to have a headache in postpartum, just from lack of sleep, due to maybe your epidural placement, or even other things like blood loss could cause a headache. But a preeclampsia headache is one that when you take Tylenol or any sort of medication, it does not really go away. And it can be so severe that it can wake you up in the middle of your sleep or can affect your ability to function because it is so painful. Other signs and symptoms that we can look out for are vision changes. So this can be spots in your vision or darkness on the sides. It feels like the walls are caving in, and then also blurred vision, especially if you've never had blurry vision. If you wear glasses and your vision is blurry when you take your glasses off, that is not a sign or symptom. Other signs and symptoms are pain in your right upper abdomen. So this is where your liver is placed. So if you start to have organ involvement with preeclampsia, you might have that right upper quadrant abdomen pain, or even epigastric pain, which your epigastric area is the middle of your chest, kind of where the rib cage and the sternum kind of meet. It's similar to heartburn pain. And this could all, again, be related to that preeclampsia starting to affect your body as a whole and the functions of your organs. So just to recap the signs and symptoms that we should be aware of, it is one, an elevated blood pressure. If you don't have a blood cuff, handy to take it, you can always just go into the hospital and they'll take your blood pressure there. An elevated blood pressure would be considered over 140 over 90. Anything above 140 over 90 is considered an elevated blood pressure. A severe ranging blood pressure, so a very concerning blood pressure that you need to seek care immediately, is anything above 160 over 110. Other symptoms are headaches, and especially with this headache, again, it does not go away when you take pain medication for it. Right upper quadrant pain, epigastric pain, and then vision changes. So that blurry vision, spots in your vision, or feel like the walls are caving in your vision. These are reasons that you need to seek care as soon as possible by either going to the emergency room or calling your provider and going to that office immediately. Some hospitals will just send you straight to the labor and delivery ward and plan that you're probably going to be in the hospital for at least 2 days, sometimes more, for them to be able to treat this blood pressure issue and then also get you on some medication so that you're able to get home to your baby. If preeclampsia is not treated, this can develop into eclampsia, which is a full-blown seizure, or if the blood pressure is so elevated, this can cause a stroke, and these both can lead to maternal death. So seeking care if you have these symptoms can be life-saving. Welcome to the MamasteFit podcast, Birth Story Fridays. On this episode, we have Dilshoda here to share her birth story and postpartum journey with postpartum preeclampsia. Thank you for coming on the episode.
Thanks for having me, ladies. Happy to be here.
So just to start, can you tell us a little bit about your pregnancy and your birth preparation going into labor?
Sure. So my pregnancy was fairly straightforward. The only complication / higher risk thing that I had was advanced maternal age because I was 36, but those numbers are probably a little outdated. But otherwise, I was staying active during my pregnancy. I was a college athlete, and then I've been doing CrossFit for quite some time. Checked with my doctor. They said if you were doing physical activity and lifting before your pregnancy, you could continue doing that. So I pretty much stayed doing CrossFit till month 9 when it got harder. So then I modified the exercises, but couldn't necessarily lift as much anymore. Otherwise, I had no high blood pressure, no gestational diabetes. It was just a pregnancy that was going along smoothly. I had some sleep-related issues that, I was dealing with, but I think that's fairly common. And my doctor recommended that I take my magnesium glycinate supplements, which did magic on me, and I was able to sleep through the night, and it was going really well. So in terms of the preparation for birth, watched a lot of YouTube videos, watched some of your content on Instagram to see what positions are helpful while laboring. My baby was OP, which means sunny side up, which means he was facing my belly. And so what I read was during labor, so I would do a lot of inversions before labor to try to get him to turn. And he would turn because I could see that during some of my antenatal ultrasound appointments. But then the following time he'd turn back. So the midwives and doctors said not to worry about it because during labor, especially if I'm able to stand, able to do various movements, he can turn. So that was my focus in terms of prep, trying to help him. I wanted to stay as unmedicated as I could, but it was my first pregnancy, so I had no idea how painful or not painful it was going to be. So I gave myself permission that if I needed medication, there's no shame in that game, and I'll just go for it, but as much as I can, especially given that I had to stay as mobile as I could to help my baby turn. I wanted to stay away from epidural as long as I could. So that was my goal going in. My baby was late or came post due date. So he came at 41 weeks and 1 day. So my doctor recommended scheduling an induction at 41 weeks and 0 days. So I went into the hospital, kind of bummed out, which I shouldn't have had preconceived notions about inductions, but, I'd read that they can be more painful and labor can be longer. So I was really hoping that he would come before then. And then just at 41 weeks, 0 days, I had an 8:30 appointment. So I went and showed up I'm from San Francisco, so I went to UCSF. I showed up, and as soon as I checked in, my water broke and my contractions started. Which is great. I guess my baby was procrastinating and
Great timing.
Yeah, I know. I know. He was like, "Okay, Mom, I'll do you a solid if you don't want an induction." So
We're already here. Might as well.
That's right. That's right. So that happened, and I started contractions, and I've asked kind of at that time my doctor and midwives if it would be okay for me to go labor at home because I live 2 blocks away from the hospital, so it was fairly easy to go back. They were kind enough to let me do that. So I went back home and I tried to take as many walks as I could. I went to the park nearby just because I wanted to have my baby turn towards my back instead of my pelvis. I did a lot of walks. I tried to do inversions, but it was a little bit harder while you're in labor. So I was just doing exercises on my labor ball, medicine ball. Went back to the hospital at 8:30 p.m. that night. So if my contractions started around 10 a.m., I didn't deliver till noon next day. So it was pretty long labor. Went back to the hospital around 8:30, like I said, and just labored without epidural as long as I could, and around 2:30 a.m. when I've been already at it for like 16 hours. I was like, all right, I throw in my towel. I just need some epidural so I can sleep. I was really hesitating about that decision initially because I thought, okay, I'm already 7 centimeters dilated. Maybe it's like really close and it's just another hour of this. And I'm glad I went for the epidural because it was another, if I didn't push till 10. So it was
10
another 8
hours.
hours of that. And I was like not having slept, was not feeling great. So then I ended up getting the epidural, which took another hour to get me because apparently I have scoliosis that I didn't know about. So they had a hard time finding how to put in the needle. So I'm sitting there.
Oh no.
I start crying and my doctor's like, oh, are you feeling pain? Is something wrong? I'm like, no, I'm just so tired. and so they're like, okay, we're trying to get it. So an hour and a half later, they were able to get me the epidural that I needed. And I couldn't feel the pain. It was obviously like uncomfortable because I had to, you can't move around once you have the epidural. You kind of have to lay there, which, I liked moving around. It helped me with some of the pain management, but it was great because I was able to get some sleep because he was a big baby. Turns out he was 9 pounds and 2 ounces. I had to push for 2 hours to get him out, which they said actually wasn't too long for a baby that size. So yeah, and then I pushed for 2 hours and he came out and he was great. He was perfect. So that's my birth story. And he managed to turn. So he was the right side. He wasn't sunny side up when he came out, which was great, really helpful to me because trying to push out an OP baby who was of that size would probably be really, really painful.
So your birth story seems pretty, cut and dry, but tell us about your postpartum experience because that was a little bit different.
Yeah, I had a vaginal delivery, so I was able to check out, 2 days later, like everything was normal. And then I was just getting used to having my baby at home. So regular stuff, changing diapers, trying to figure out sleep, which you don't get too much of when they're that little and have to be up every 2 hours. And then I would say 3 days after I got checked out of the hospital, I woke up. So it was, Sunday morning around 4 a.m. and the baby was asleep. I remember I was trying to get some sleep and I woke up from splitting headache, which, I've never woken up from a headache. I don't suffer from headaches at all. I've never had migraines. So I was like, oh, it's a little weird. I wonder why that might be. And I didn't think too much of it. I remember the doctors mentioning that I might have a headache after, and it's a common symptom of like post-epidural for some people. I think they were saying 10% of women get headaches post-epidural, but they resolve themselves within a couple of weeks. So I was thinking, okay, maybe it's post-epidural headache, which they said just take Tylenol or Motrin or some of the pain medications that they'd given me. So I took it and it helped a little bit, but not too much. And so I called my sister, who is a nurse anesthetist, and she does epidural. So I was like, hey, I've been having this headache throughout the day. It's probably nothing. I had a little bit of it yesterday too, but it wasn't a splitting headache and it wasn't waking me up from my sleep. Now it's kind of gotten more intense. And so she was asking me, she was like, oh, do you have any light sensitivity? Because epidural headaches tend to have some light sensitivity associated with them. And I was like, I don't think I do. But she was like, oh, don't worry. If so, they're very common. They'll resolve themselves. Just keep taking your, pain medication. And so I kept doing that. And I remember it helped a little bit, but later in the evening, I could feel the headache get more intense again. And I asked my husband, I was like, listen, I remember reading in something in the after visit summary that the hospital gives you that one of the, you have to look out for hemorrhage and you have to look out for headaches. But they also warned us they could be just epidural headaches, which are absolutely benign. And I was like, why don't I, in the after visit summary, since they mentioned headaches, I was like, why don't I measure my blood pressure just because I have a blood pressure machine at home? And at that point, I didn't even know that it was preeclampsia related, or it could be preeclampsia. I just, figured, sometimes headaches could come with blood pressure. And I measured my blood pressure in the evening, and it was like 175 over 110 or something, which is really, really high. And I'd never had blood pressure issues ever. I go to the doctor and it's always like 115 or 120 over 70 or something like that. And so the hospital has the triage number that you're supposed to call if you're hemorrhaging or something is going on to check. And I didn't even know that 175 was a high read. I just remember telling my mom. My mom was like, that's really high. And I was like, oh, okay. So I called the triage number that they gave me, and I was like, hey, I have a headache that won't go away, and my blood pressure is high, and here's the reading. And then they told me, okay, you have to show up to the hospital, like ASAP. And I was a little hesitant because I was like, are you sure? Maybe we should just monitor at home just because I have a little baby at home and I don't really want to go back to the hospital. I just got out of there. And they're like, yeah, it could be life-threatening condition, but don't worry, we'll just do a couple of tests and most likely we'll just send you back home. But we just need to rule some things out. I was like, okay, that doesn't sound that bad. So I just went. Luckily, I live a few blocks away from my hospital. I show up to the hospital and they do a couple of tests, which is blood pressure, which remained really high. They were measuring it every 10 minutes and it was really high. They asked me if I had any spots in my vision or anything was off vision related, which later I learned with postpartum preeclampsia, if you're getting close to having a seizure or you have swelling edema in your brain, that's what, that pressure can cause that, which I didn't have. Luckily, I didn't have any vision related issues. They asked me about the headache and how, the pain levels. So the liver enzymes were high as well, and they were concerning. I asked them if it was related to bleeding that I had during my delivery, because I had hemorrhaged some. I forgot to mention that during delivery, I hemorrhaged about 1 liter of blood, but it was taken care of, so it was fine. I was discharged, but I was like, oh, my hemoglobin levels are low, so maybe something with liver enzymes could also maybe be related to bleeding. I don't know. I'm not a doctor. I was just spewing stuff out to see if I could go back home. They said, no, this is textbook case of postpartum preeclampsia. Unfortunately, you have to stay, hopefully for only 24 hours, but it could be longer, which obviously is not what you want to hear if you're, a mom with a 3-day-old baby at home that you're trying to nurse and trying to take care of. But they said it was really important because I can have a seizure, I can have a stroke and die. I'd asked them because I've heard about preeclampsia during pregnancy, and I heard that cure for preeclampsia is delivery. A lot of the times that's what doctors say. So it was really surprising to me that someone with no preeclampsia during pregnancy could suddenly develop postpartum preeclampsia. I hadn't heard about it, and someone had the doctor who was talking to me had mentioned that 1/3 of the cases happened during pregnancy, 1/3 happened during delivery, and 1/3 happens after pregnancy. And I thought that that's one of the reasons why I'm talking to you guys, because I had never known that information. A lot of the times after pregnancy, moms are busy trying to figure out how to take care of their baby. They're not sleeping much. And also, the symptoms are pretty benign, like headache, you could get it from epidural. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have preeclampsia. So it's easy to ignore those symptoms or assume that they're related to something else. Maybe they're related to the blood that you lost during the delivery. Maybe it was epidural. Maybe it was, just you not sleeping and you're 100% focused on your baby. You're not as focused on you. So it's really, I guess, important to listen to those symptoms because they could be life-threatening. And the hospital had mentioned that at any point in time, they have at least one patient with postpartum preeclampsia. So it's fairly common. It's not a super, I mean, it's rare, I guess, in the grand scheme of things, but they see it pretty frequently. And so they gave me 24 hours of magnesium IV, which is supposed to cut the seizure risk by half. And then they tried to test out different doses of blood pressure medication to see if it would come down, and then check in on my headache. The next steps were if the headaches didn't go away or I had vision-related issues, they were going to send me for an MRI just to see if my brain was swelling, which luckily I didn't have to do and it wasn't swelling. But slightly frustrating thing is they don't just give you the blood pressure medication and let you go. Even after you're done with your 24 hours of magnesium, which, is a drip that you have to be attached to, they actually have to make sure that your blood pressure is normal for roughly 24 hours after changing every dose. And so they've changed my dose a couple of times. So all in all, I had to stay in the hospital for 3 days until it's stabilized. Luckily, my baby was able to come, not for the nights, but at least during the day, and I was able to take care of him. And then 3 days later, they gave me the meds, and I've been just taking them at home and measuring my blood pressure at home, and it's doing well. They said that most of the preeclampsia, postpartum preeclampsia symptoms go away within 4 to 6 weeks after delivery, but they also had mentioned to mention it to my primary care physician because women who do get it might be at risk of having high blood pressure later in life, and they have 20 to 30% risk of developing preeclampsia with their next pregnancy. So postpartum, all in all, wasn't as smooth as the pregnancy journey, but, in the grand scheme of things, the good thing is we caught it early and we were able to deal with it early. But if you don't catch it early and you just keep ignoring it, you can die, you can have a stroke, you can have a seizure. So I figured it'd be important to share this so moms know what to look out for and not to ignore some of these symptoms that are generally pretty benign.
Like you said, headache. I feel like almost everybody has a headache in the postpartum, and you can easily be like, oh, well, I haven't been sleeping, or like I lost a lot of blood, and a very common symptom from blood loss is having a headache because like the oxygen is not able to transport in your body as easily. Lack of sleep. Like if you had an epidural and you get that spinal headache because of the way that the epidural is placed, you could get a headache. There's just literally so many reasons. But it's so easy to just go to the hospital and get checked out and they'd be like, yeah, you just are not sleeping. So try to sleep. Or like, yeah, it's just an epidural headache. Or yeah, it's just like you lost like 2 liters of blood. So that's why you're having this headache. But it's easy to just check a blood pressure to be like, yeah, everything is fine. You can go home versus just staying home and then you have like a stroke or a seizure at home, and like 911 is great and it can potentially be there in time to like save your life, but sometimes it can't.
Yeah.
So knowing the signs and symptoms and that it even is a possibility is a really good thing. So thank you so much for coming on here and sharing your story.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, to me, it was also, I was asking the doctor, I was like, hey, are there any comorbidities? Like, what causes it? And people don't really know what causes it at all and why it comes. Because
no,
I, as someone who's exercised religiously during my pregnancy and ate well and is, really into fitness and never had blood pressure related issues, I was, why should it happen to me? I never had, preeclampsia in general.
Yeah.
And they'd mentioned that, it doesn't matter if you, exercise a lot or if you eat right, or if they just don't really know. Sometimes it appears out of nowhere. It's hard to tell who it will strike. And so I was just surprised that I guess we don't know more about what causes it or how to address it or how to minimize the risk The only thing they told me was for the next pregnancy, because I had this condition, they will likely have me take baby aspirin throughout my pregnancy just because sometimes it helps. But otherwise, they don't really know why it happens. They don't know why it happens to the people it happens. It's, I guess, labor in general and pregnancy in general, there are enough changes in your body that, these things can occur.
Yeah, and your exercising throughout your pregnancy may have delayed the onset of it as well. Like if you didn't exercise, potentially you would have developed it during pregnancy, but exercising, especially in like the first trimester, can be really beneficial for placenta development, which may be related to preeclampsia. So the reason you may not have had it during pregnancy could have been because you were exercising too.
Yeah.
So I would definitely sustain that for future pregnancies as well.
Yeah. But yeah, I really wish we knew like what caused for sure like preeclampsia, because it is like we get people sometimes that literally did work out their entire pregnancy and like eat really well. They're like, yeah, like I eat like a really good balanced diet, and like their babies aren't like doing anything crazy, and they will develop like severe preeclampsia just like overnight, like either like at the end of their pregnancy or postpartum, and they're like, why me? And we joke that like preeclampsia is just like they literally just take a arrow and throw it on the wall, and they're like, yep, that person's gonna get it. Because sometimes like there are risk factors, but even if you have all of the risk factors, like you could not develop it, and you could have zero risk factors and still develop it like super severe. So it's a disease that we definitely need to know more about, and they do a lot of research, but it's just kind of hard to figure it out.
Yeah, and I think you're right. Exercise may have helped, because I had a doctor's appointment a couple of days ago, last Friday, and I was, checking whether my blood pressure dose, medication dose is okay, because they usually taper you off as time passes on, as your body starts to feel normal again. And I was like, it seems really abrupt that it comes on its own randomly. And the doctor had mentioned that sometimes, to your point, it is happening in the background. It is developing in the background throughout pregnancy, but we don't know, and we aren't able to catch it because they were measuring my blood pressure and it was totally normal. And so maybe, actually, you were right. Maybe the fact that I didn't have a pregnancy preeclampsia was due to exercise helping me manage some of that. And then obviously I didn't get too much time for that in the last month. I did, prenatal yoga rather, but, couldn't do as much as I did before. And so, yeah, it's really odd. But yeah, it could be that it was helping me and I wasn't developing it earlier because of that. And then suddenly it hit me.
Yeah. It's hard to say, like, obviously, like, no one's saying, like, if you did do this one thing, you wouldn't have developed it. But, well, we really appreciate you coming on the podcast to share your story, because I think it is going to bring a lot of awareness to the postpartum preeclampsia that most folks are probably not aware of. And I think it is, like, something that really does contribute towards maternal mortality after birth. And so I think being aware of, like, not ignoring your symptoms and also being willing to go and seek care when it is kind of like, hey, this is kind of a big deal, is also like equally as important, because it is really hard to care for your baby if you do have to be hospitalized, but it's significantly harder to care for your baby if you do have one of the side effects of preeclampsia, like a seizure or stroke or death. So
yeah,
I'm really glad that you did seek care, that you weren't like, no, I'm fine. And I'm really thankful for you to come on the podcast and share your story with all of our listeners.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for talking to me.
Preeclampsia can develop during pregnancy, during labor, or in that postpartum period, and seeking care and knowing what the signs and symptoms are to seek that care can be life-saving. So just to recap, what are the signs and symptoms that you're looking for, not just in the postpartum, but also during pregnancy? Or an elevated blood pressure, so anything above 140/90 or above 160/110. A headache that does not go away with Tylenol or any sort of pain medication. Right upper quadrant pain in your belly. Epigastric pain, that's a little bit different than heartburn. It's just more pain, not really that burning. And then any changes in your vision. So blurry vision, spots in your vision, or it feels like the walls are kind of caving in type vision. Those are reasons to definitely go seek care as soon as you possibly can. Call 911, go to the emergency room, or going to your OB's office to be seen and treated for this high blood pressure can be life-saving.
If you enjoy this episode, be sure to subscribe to our podcast so you get notified whenever we release new episode. We release a new educational episode every Wednesday and a new birth story or postpartum story every Friday. If you want more support during your pregnancy, join our prenatal fitness programs and our childbirth education course. If you want more support after birth, you can join our postpartum fitness programs and our newly released postpartum preparation course that includes infant CPR, infant massage, newborn care, and Roxanne will be educating you on all the things that you can do to prepare for the postpartum period. A lot of our preparation tends to really focus on birth preparation and then preparing for our baby, so the nursery, your registry, and we sometimes forget about what we need to do to prepare ourselves for the postpartum as well. So you can check out all of our courses on our website at MamasteFit.com, and you can use code STORY10 to get 10% off any of our course and fitness programs.